Hello, everyone. Good day once again, and I would want to welcome you back to the Big Push Bootcamp organized by God Academy. Once again, my name is Godson Inchi. I'm the instructor for this particular bootcamp. Today, we are going to talk about a very, very interesting course, which I believe is really going to help you in the long run, right? Because project management is actually a skill that when you have, you can actually work in a lot of companies, right? So I'd want you all to pay close attention to whatever I would be teaching you and ensure that you grasp every single bit of information I provide you, right? Yes. So back at it again. Today we are discussing the introduction to project management. And as part of this journey, we are going to look at project management tools. Yes. So let's get started. Now, when we talk about project management, first and most important, we have to know the definition. Then we take it from there, right? So when we talk about project management simply means applying knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to meet project requirements and achieve desired outcomes. So the whole thing is that, let's say you are working in a company, right? The company has a lot of projects ongoing. You actually need someone who can track the status of the project. You actually need someone who can check if a task has been done, if a task has been scheduled, if a task is pending, if a task has been cancelled, if a task is completed. You need someone who can draw the project timeline. I mean, you need someone who has the knowledge and the skills, right? And using various tools and techniques to actually meet the project requirements. Right. So that is basically what project management is. I mean, it's very detailed. As we move on, you would get to uncover certain concepts under project management. But then for now, let's just take this basic definition and later on we are going to digest it further. Right. So the key benefit is that it's applicable across industries without requiring deep technical knowledge. So, as a project manager, you don't really need any deep technical experience, right? Yes, when you understand the principles of project management, you can actually oversee a lot of projects, right? Yes, so that is basically what it means. Now, at this particular stage, we are just doing introduction to project management. So I'll give you the basic stages when it comes to project management, right? So we are going to tackle three main stages. The first one is planning, the second one is scheduling, then the last one is controlling, right? So as we proceed, we are going to dive deep into the various stages, right? So just take note of that. Would get back to that as well, right? Good. So now we are going to look at the program structure. Under this particular project management course, we are going to look at the structure of how it will look like. Right. So we have fundamentals of project management, and that's what we are doing today. Then we have setting the stage for success, project planning, how you can create milestones, dependencies, budgeting, risk management. Yes, then we move on to project execution, communication, risk management, team dynamics, data driven decisions. Then we look at agile project management, right? We'll look at the principles, the sprint, and the releases. Then we now look at the real world application where we are going to use a project management tool to manage a project, right? Good. So that's the program structure. Now, let's move on to talk about the key responsibilities when it comes to project management, right? So, I'll just tackle the most important ones. And yes, because project management is very broad, right? Good. So, the first one we are going to talk about is planning and organizing, right? So, and the second one is budgeting and cost control. So, when it comes to planning and organizing, you definitely have to use productivity tools, I mean, to create processes, right? So the whole thing is that with project management, there are project management tools we can use like ClickUp, you can use Asana, you can use Monday.com, and the rest. Yes. Now, I mean, you can also use Notion as well. I forgot to mention Notion. It's a very good tool. So, as a project manager, you need to know how to use these project management tools. Because when a project is being assigned to a team, you need to know how to, one, plan the project. So let's say with this particular project, as part of our plans, we have to complete the project in 3 months' time. Yes. So you have to set the plan and everything using the project management tool, so that when your team goes there, they will be able to know what they are supposed to do, the timeline associated with that particular task they've been assigned to, and all the related processes under project management. Right. Good. So project management is not just something that you do at your end as a project manager. You have to also collaborate with your team. Because if, let's say, you assign a task to, let's say, an engineer, right, who is part of your company. Now, you assign the task to, let's say, design a 3D model of, let's say, a particular machine. Now, that particular task has been assigned to that engineer. Now, you give a due date, so a start date and a due date. Right? So once the engineer completes the task, the engineer will check in that that particular task has been completed. So what you are going to do as a project manager is that you are going to track the status of all those tasks, and you get to know if you are actually progressing, or you are stagnant, or you are retrogressing. Get it? So planning and organizing is one of the major roles when it comes to project management. And you develop and maintain plans, timelines, schedules, etc. I've already explained this. Right? Then we also have budgeting and cost control. So with this, I usually don't see a lot of project managers doing this, as there are dedicated roles in certain companies that handle stuff like that, right? But then the most important thing here I would want you to know is track issues, right? And then risks. So you see, there are certain tasks that are very critical, and there are tasks that are dependent on other tasks. So if, let's say, task B is dependent on task A, then it means that we have to complete task A before we can move on to complete task B. So yes, that's basically it, right? And let's say the risk at which, let's say, not completing task B is maybe very high. So as a project manager, you know that if this particular task is not complete or is not done, we will be at a very high risk. So you make sure that you structure the timelines, the plans, the schedules in such a way that you'll be able to track your risks as well. You get it? Good. So that's a basic explanation. We'll dive deeper as we proceed. Right. Now we also have the role within a team. Now, there's one thing that a lot of people confuse when it comes to project management. As a project manager, you are not the direct manager, in the sense that a manager guides tasks, not so sorry, in the sense that a project manager guides tasks, not people. So the direct manager of the company is in charge of the people, but then as a project manager, you are in charge of guiding tasks. So get the difference. Right. Now, we also have team dynamics. Each member is an expert in their role. Project manager coordinates efforts. You get it? As a project manager, you are supposed to coordinate their efforts. See, if you're a project manager, you can be handling a project which requires over 10 teams. You are not in charge of the people, you are in charge of the tasks, and you are in charge of coordinating their efforts. Their efforts as in you ensuring that they get the work done. As simple as ABCD. Right. Good. So example, on a camping trip, you assign tent selection to an experienced camper. You get it? So as a project manager, right, you know your team very well. You know they are good when it comes to, let's say, a software development company. You have front-end developers, you have back-end developers. So when there's a task where you have to build a UI, a user interface for a product or a project, you assign it to a front-end developer. You get it? So that is what you do as a project manager. You get it? Good. So you guide tasks, as simple as ABC, right? Now, when it comes to task management, right? You track tasks to manage workload and demonstrate progress. So example, created project trackers for curriculum development, updated stakeholders regularly. So now the thing is, you are working with a company. Let's say you are working with a software development company, right? Now, this software development company has front-end developers, has back-end developers, has Q&A testers, has, let's say, AI engineers as well. Now, there's a product you have to develop. The team has to develop. As a project manager, you are going to create project trackers in the sense that you actually want to track every milestone. You actually want to see progress with the development of the product. So when when before everything starts, you are going to know the various roles, the people who are going to work on the project. You are going to draw a plan, a very, very structured plan. You get a timeline. So let's say we are starting from January 22nd to March 24th. So that's the timeline of the project. Now, what you do is that you now break it down into tasks. So let's say the UI designers would have to create a very good UI, user interface, for and user experience for the product. So that could be done in, let's say, the first 2 weeks. So you assign the tasks, and even under the UI, you break it down into subtasks. So let's say from day 1 to day 2, you are supposed to design the landing page. From day 3 to day 4, you are supposed to design the admin dashboard, just like that, right? So once that is done, then you now assign the tasks. So when you assign the tasks, you now manage it. So if, let's say, a task has been completed, you ensure that the task has been moved from, let's say, to do to what? Completed. So you ensure that the tasks are well managed such that it conforms or it collocates with the direction of the timeline. It meets the timeline such that at the end of the day, right, based on the timeline we created, all the tasks that were created was able to like move the team to complete the entire project, right? So that is what we mean by task management. Now, I'm going to talk about something that is really important when it comes to project management, and it is called interpersonal skills. So, as a project manager, you need these interpersonal skills. And see, these skills are very, very important. So, do well to have them, right? Now, the first thing I'll talk about is effective communication. Now, you can't be a project manager and have very poor communication. See, communication is something that is very, very important. Now, you are working with different teams, right? You need to communicate clearly, because if you don't communicate on a task clearly, you end up making the team perform something that does not go, or that is not aligned to what the project entails. So you have to be very, very good when it comes to communication. One other thing too is that as a project manager, you check progress. So if, let's say, a team member has an overdue task, right, you have to communicate nicely with a team member so that you don't get a team member being upset. You get it? Good. So when you're checking progress, you have to communicate effectively so that you get the most important updates from the team, and you make sure that you move with that. Right? And as a project manager, you also give feedbacks. So let's say at the end of every week, right, the company has this culture where everybody comes under a meeting, then you discuss the task that the task you were able to do during the week, right? Now, as a project manager, right, well, it depends on the culture of the company. There are certain companies that when the size of the company is very small, you can actually organize a meeting and everybody will get to speak. But if the company is very large, right? Has a whole lot of people. It will depend on the project manager to do that particular communication. So you have to be very good when it comes to effective communication so that you can clearly communicate the progress of the company to the various stakeholders, or let's say to the CEO, or anyone who is willing to hear from you, right? Now, you also need to know how to negotiate, right? You also know how to negotiate. You see, sometimes, right, when it comes to productivity, you can have very, very good employees, right? You can have very, very good workers, but then productivity is something that's it, it entails a lot. You can have very experienced workers, but then they might not be productive. It might be that they are doing something else that is not relevant to what they have to do at the company. So you see, as I said earlier, you have to be very good when it comes to communicating well. So use your effective communication skills and your negotiation skills to speak to that particular worker. You get it? And sometimes too, as a project manager, right? Let's say there's a critical deadline, right? So let's say the company is facing a very serious issue and you have to make one particular worker work on the task as soon as possible. Now, that particular worker is also doing something else as part of task assigned to him or her under the company, right? As a project manager, you need to have very good negotiation skills to speak with the worker, to speak with the worker in order to get on the critical task and do it as soon as possible. You get it? Good. So you need to have very good negotiation skills, and then you also need to have conflict mediation skills. So you see, sometimes there can be team disputes. So as a project manager, you have to know how to uh, be a mediator, right? You should know how to resolve team disputes, because see, if there are team disputes, it's going to affect the progress of the project. So you need to have that as well. And you also need to understand motivations, right? See, there are certain people, there are certain workers, they have everyone has their what motivates them, right? So it could be that you have some workers, right? The workers, example, let's say software developers. Personally, when I'm building solutions, when I'm building software solutions, I like to work remotely. I don't like a situation where I would have to sit in a car. From home to work, a whole lot of traffic in Ghana, and a whole lot. Right? I really don't like that stress. So if you give me a remote opportunity, I would be very, very happy and I'll work gladly. In fact, I would work so well that you'd be very happy about my energy when it comes to working remotely. So as a project manager, if you know that you are able to understand me very well and you can even communicate with, let's say, the CEO, that this particular person is facing this issue, this is his motivations and stuff, maybe you should give him a chance, right? And that is going to speed up the progress of the project. That is perfectly fine. You get that? Yeah. So you need to know how to understand. You need to understand motivations, right? You need to tailor feedback. You need to give recognitions to individuals as well. If someone does a work very well, if let's say the deadline is on Friday and the person is able to do it so well and get it done 2 days before, give that recognition to the person. Give that person the praise. You get it, and inspire the team to move on. Yes. So with this one, I want to repeat it again. As a project manager, you have to know how to influence without authority. I mentioned this in the previous subtopic, right? And I said that as a project manager, you guide a team without being their boss. Because as a project manager, you guide tasks. You get it? So you guide a team without being their boss. Take note of that. Example, you need to motivate a late coworker by adjusting communication or highlighting impacts. That was why I mentioned that effective communication is something that is really It's a skill that is really good for you as a project manager. So if let's say a worker is always late to work, you know that definitely is going to affect progress of a project, or let's say for a task to be done. As a project manager, you have to guide that particular person without being his or her boss. So how do you do that? You can speak you can speak with the team member that, well, so let's say, hey, Daniel, how are you doing? I trust you're doing well. Good. So I've realized that the tasks that have been assigned to you, tasks which have been assigned to you for the past 3 weeks, have been delaying. But then I mean, it's a good, it's not really bad. You perform well. But I believe that when we adjust one or two things, it's going to increase the performance of your work. So how do we do that? By you being punctual to work. So I just wanted to have a conversation with you so we can adjust that particular attitude, right? I mean, you can have a better way of communicating with the person, right? You are not their boss, so you can't tell them that, hey, next time be punctual to work. You are affecting your listeners is affecting the performance of our work. No. So guide team without being their boss as a project manager. Good. Now, before we end, I have two main things I would want us to discuss. And the first one is how to assign tasks effectively. Now, as a project manager, you can use the task framework to assign tasks effectively. So when we talk about a framework, what do we mean by a framework? So frameworks guides you on how to do certain things strategically and in a more systematic format. Right. So the task framework, T stands for target, A stands for assign, S stands for set, and K stands for keep. So target clearly, assign strategically, set expectations, and keep accountable. So let's take it one by one. So for you to assign a task, right, you define the objective in one sentence. What exactly needs to be done? So that is the first thing. You target clearly. So under the targeting side, you can use the SMART framework as well. The objective should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and what? Time bound. So that is the T. The A is you assign strategically. So you choose the right person based on their skills, workload, and ownership to do that particular task. You can't assign a graphic designing task to a back-end engineer. You get it? Yes. So you assign strategically. And you need to clarify why they are the best fit. And see, even under the graphic design example I gave, when it comes to certain tasks, certain designs are high level. So definitely you have to give those high level tasks to the most experienced person on the team. You get it? So you assign strategically. Then you set the expectations. Now you need to clearly communicate the deadline, the quality standards, the dependencies, and the reporting frequency. So as for deadline, I've already explained it. You know what quality standards mean, and you know what quality standards means. You dependencies, right? Maybe you quite remember I mentioned that some tasks are dependent on the others, right? Yes, and the reporting frequency. So there's something we call check-in meetings. So usually companies do have check-in meetings to get to know what's happening, right? Yes. But then as a project manager, you can also set a reporting frequency. So let's say if the task would take 4 weeks to do, right? You can set a reporting frequency of, let's say, a weekly reporting frequency so that you can get feedbacks from team members assigned to do the tasks, right? Good. So that's it for the set expectations, and you keep accountable. So you establish check-in points. I just mentioned check-in meetings, right? Yeah. So you can use tools like Asana, Trello, ClickUp, Jira. These are project management tools, right? And then you apply this. So RACI. So it stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and then informed if needed. Good. So you can use this framework as well when you want to keep accountable. Right. Yeah. So these are just basics. We are going to learn how to use the tools to do all these things. So you just have to know this, right? Good. Now, when it comes to the last part of this session, we are basically going to discuss how to prioritize effectively. Good. So I have a framework you can use, which is the PRIO framework. And you can use that framework for prioritization. Good. So the P stands for purpose first, R stands for rank by urgency and importance, I stands for impact versus effort, and O stands for own with data and context. Good. So purpose first. So you ask yourself, does this task align with our goals or critical outcomes? That is the first thing you need to ask yourself. Right. Good. So you need to know the purpose. If it's something that is irrelevant, you definitely don't have to go for it. Good. So you need to focus on high impact items tied to the project's missions or KPIs, key performance indicators. So you need to know the purpose first. Now the next thing you do is you rank by urgency and importance. Right? So you can use the Eisenhower metrics. Right? So we have the do now, schedule, delegate, and eliminate. So if the task is urgent and important, then it means you have to do it now. So you first start. If let's say the task, right, if it aligns with the project missions or KPIs, then you definitely have to go for it. Right? Good. So let's say you have let's say you have four different tasks that align with the company's goals or the project's critical outcomes. Right. Now, so you prioritize all those, you get all those tasks, you list them down. You now move on to the next stage, which is ranked by urgency and importance. Now, if the task is urgent and important, then you have to do it now. If the second task is, let's say, is not urgent, but then it is important. If it is not urgent but important, then you definitely have to schedule it for another time so you can get ample time to do the urgent and important task. Now, if the task is urgent but not important, you have to delegate. So you can assign someone who is free to do that particular thing. And if the task is not urgent and it's not important, then you eliminate it. Right? You eliminate it. You totally eliminate it. Now, we now move on to the impact versus effort. So you can apply the ICE or Pascal model to do that. Now, if it is, you definitely know that high impact task which requires low effort is equal to quick wins. I'll explain that. Now, high effort plus low impact is equal to delay or drop. Now, how do we break this down? Let's say there are certain tasks in the company that requires high effort. You need a lot of people to actually do that task, and you need a higher level of involvement. But those tasks, at the end of the day, the impact is very low to the company. So for something like that, it's either you delay it or you drop it. You get it? So tasks that require very high effort, but then low impact, has very low impact. You either delay or you drop it. Now, there are tasks that have high impact, but then low effort. These tasks gives quick wins. So you definitely have to go for it. Right? As simple as ABCD. Now, we also have the own with data and context. Now, you have to consider dependencies, resource availability, stakeholder pressure, and risk levels. So you see, you can have a task. The purpose is right. It's urgent and important. It is something that will provide us a quick win. But then, you have to also know I mean, you can have two same tasks. That's, I mean, it's purposeful, it's urgent and important. It's high impacts with low effort. Like two same tasks. Now, there's one other thing that also is also a deciding factor, right? Dependencies. It could be that another critical task is dependent on this task. So it means you have to do it now. Resource availability. Now, it could be that the task is critical, but then the resources are limited. So you have to make sure that you get the resources before, I mean, you get the resources for the work to be done. Sorry, for the work to be done. Now, sometimes we have stakeholder pressure from the top. So if the pressure from the top is very high, you definitely have to prioritize the task. So if the pressure from the top is very high, you know that, and the task is urgent and important, it provides quick wins, you have to definitely go for it. And as well as what risk levels, right? Good. So today we've been able to discuss what project management is. We've been able to know the program structure for this particular course under the Big Push Bootcamp. We've also discussed the interpersonal skills for project managers. We've learned the key responsibilities of project managers, and then we've learned how to assign and prioritize tasks effectively. This brings us to the end of today's session on Introduction to Project Management. Next time, we are going to jump on the next section, and trust me, it's going to be an amazing one. Once again, my name is Cotton Entry, and I'm very glad to be your instructor for the Big Push Bootcamp. Have a lovely day. See you. Bye.